I love worker placement games. However, over the years, worker placement games are getting sort of samey after you've been playing them for 10 to 15 years. That's why whenever one comes out that's just a little bit different, it really pulls me in. And that's exactly what happened in 2015. Holy cow, 2015. Getting old. When designer Shem Phillips and Garfield Games released Raiders of the North Sea. This is a Viking themed game, but what's unique about it is how the workers are placed on the board. You only have one worker each round. You place a worker, you take an action, you pick up another worker and take an action from wherever you picked it up from. That will be your worker for the next round. That is it, but it's something that's so simple that made the game so enjoyable. So as a fan of that game, I was excited when Direwolf Digital released a Switch version of Raiders of the North Sea. The Raiders of the North Sea Switch app gives you the option to play in solo mode or multiplayer. Oh, hold on. Looks like it is my turn in the game. Let's go take it real quick. This game has you collecting resources and hiring Viking warriors in order to go raid the monasteries and harbors and fortresses in order to gain plunder and victory points. Over the course of the game, you're going to be placing workers in order to get provisions and get cards, get money to hire those workers, then actually go out and attack the surrounding area. By the way, Tony, it's your turn. But before we get into the meat of the game, let's just see how good the tutorial is, because if you've never played, that's going to be the first place that you go. They have it split up over two different tutorials, and in the first tutorial, they just explain the concept of placing a worker and picking up a worker. In fact, they don't even have all the buildings on the board. And this was kind of confusing to me because I've played the board game version, and in my mind, I knew it's like, wait a minute, there's something missing in this tutorial. But if you've never played, this is probably a really good way to get into it because they're slowly introducing you to the buildings as you go along. So they'll walk you through teaching you how to get additional cards, how to hire new warriors, how to get gold, how to get provisions. And when you progress to the second tutorial is where they introduce even more buildings and give you the opportunity to go out and actually do some raids and play a short, quick game. Now, as someone who hasn't played the game in years, I felt like, well, the best place to start is a tutorial to get a refresher course. And in fact, my friend and co-host Tony and I sat on the plane coming back from Gen Con going through the tutorial to learn how to play it. And after we got through both of the tutorials, we kind of looked at each other, it's like, did everything come rushing back to you? And it didn't. It's a good introduction, but there's a lot of little things that they don't really address in the tutorial. Like exactly how all the buildings work or exactly how each of the Viking cards work. But luckily, there is an in-depth rules section in the game where you can go look up rules, and they're split up into sections on buildings and villages and how they all work. It's easily accessible. You can scroll through it and read it for yourself. And in fact, if you are learning the game for the first time, I would recommend kind of scrolling through those rules after you do the tutorial. And if you've played the game before, you have to get used to the idea that this doesn't look like the game board. And that's another thing that kind of threw me too. I was expecting a nice game board looking like I've played for all those years, and it was something totally different. That's not a bad thing, which I'll cover later in the video, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. Now let's get into the game itself. If you want to play against the AI, you have several options. You can play 2, 3, or 4 player. You can select the game type anywhere from just a normal game or making something a little bit more difficult and letting them start out with some extra resources. And once you're ready to go, you jump into the game and start playing. As you can see, they've done an amazing job with the graphics in the game. You have your little village here where you're doing all your main actions, such as collecting cards, playing cards, getting provisions, getting coins, beefing up your defense, going to the longhouse in order to get some extra victory points. All of it's right there. And it's north because it's Raiders of the North Sea. Duh. You go north in order to start actually raiding harbors and fortresses and monasteries. And to get to that point, you have to hire a lot of Viking warriors to go along with you, and that's where the cards come into play. Each of the cards have various abilities, so you're going to have to create a crew of up to 5 members in order to take that crew out raiding, in order to get some gold and some additional coins and victory points, which is the main goal of this game. The controls on the Switch are very well done. Each of the actions show you which button you need in order to activate it. You can switch between looking at your crew and your hand. You can look at each of the individual cards and what they do. You can scroll around the board using the right stick in order just to easily scroll all over the place. You can use the left stick in order to go between each of the individual buildings. And one little tip for you, one thing that I didn't notice, even though it's an icon in the top right of the screen, the ZR button, which is the map button. By hitting that button, you get a view of the map of the places that you can go and raid. It shows you what provisions you need, how many crew that you need, and the rewards that you'll get for going there. And as each of those are taken, they'll go away from the map. So you don't need to scroll all the way up and then all the way back down, which I was doing, which I found annoying. And then it was like, oh, right there on the screen, ZR. That's convenient. The buildings are laid out well as far as what they do once you understand the icons. Now, there was one thing that wasn't explained in the tutorial that I'll show you right here because I think it's important to notice. Some of these buildings have to use certain color pieces. So some of them require white or gray, some of them require white, and some of them can use black. But to indicate which buildings are what, beside the name, such as Longhouse, you'll see a circle with half of it white, half of it gray. That indicates it takes a white or gray worker to go there. Up in some of the areas where you attack, it takes a certain color worker. So be cognizant of that, because that was a little thing that I missed early on. It's like, why can't I go to the Longhouse? And then I realized, oh, what? Takes a white or gray worker to go there. Again, once I recognized what that icon meant, then it was really straightforward. One thing I love about this game are the animations. This does not feel like a board game. It feels like I'm playing more of a turn-based strategy game where I'm sending out Vikings to raid. They have the nice animations of the boats going up and attacking the areas. By the way, I just want to comment on the art style of this game. When the board game first came out, I just fell in love with the art. When you think of Vikings going out and raiding and pillaging and stuff, that can be somewhat of a dark topic, but they've put on this nice like cartoony look, and it's bright colors and everything, and a lot of animated figures with really good caricatures, and that's translated to this video game as well. Even though you're using the actual art that's on the cards, the entire layout of the game looks like that. And all the credit for that goes to Mihailo Dimitrievski, who not only did the art for this game, but also the other in this line of games, such as Architects of the West Kingdom and Paladins of the West Kingdom. So cheers to the amazing art style used in the board game and this video game. Before anybody comments, yes, I'm wearing a Mountain Dew shirt and drinking tea. I didn't have any Mountain Dew in the house. This game does have achievements built into it where it's like if you accumulate a certain amount of plunder or gold, etc., you can level up. I haven't seen what the benefit of that is of going up in levels unless it's just for bragging rights, but it's there if you want to try to chase those. And if you want another way to play, there's also a campaign mode made up of a lot of different scenarios. Each scenario is different, has different criteria for winning. It may start out the board looking a little bit different, or there's just different goals that you're going to have over the course of the game just to keep the game fresh and give you some new ways to play. And that's the part I've been really enjoying. I've been playing more through the campaign than I have just individual solo games. But solo is not the only way that you can play, as there are multiplayer versions. First, locally, there's just a pass and play option. You can set up the number of players that's going to play. You'll take your turn. They'll tell you to pass it. You pass the switch to another individual, so that way you can't see everybody's cards and everything. And there is an online mode. Thank you, Dire Wolf Digital, for giving 2 ways to play online. One is you can play live, hook up with somebody and just play right then and there. Or you can play asynchronously, where you can set up a game with somebody, they accept, and then you take turns playing, so you haven't got to sit there and watch the switch the entire time. Every so often, you can just go back and take your turn. By the way, Tony, it's still your turn. I love the graphics of this game because it looks like a video game and not a board game. And personally, I really think that's important, because there's a lot of Switch owners out there who may have never heard of Raiders of the North Sea. And they may see this and download it and try it, and it doesn't have that board gamey look like where you're just looking at a stale board and just moving pieces around on it. It looks more like a video style game. And with video games now having mechanics of a board game such as Hearthstone and the big video game Slay the Spire, the concept of board game mechanics in video games is becoming more accepted and way more popular. I mean, Slay the Spire is everywhere, and at its core, it's a deck building game. In fact, as I was playing this on the TV, my son said, "Is this a video game, or is this a video game of a board game?" Just the way it looks, you don't really know, because it doesn't have that look of the board. So if you're from a board gaming perspective, that look may first throw you off because you know what the board looks like, so you have to kind of relearn that. But for somebody who's never seen it, I think it'll just really draw them in with the art style and the animation and the sound. It's just done really well. Here's the thing. I need you to look at me for this. Look at me. Look at me. I don't know why I said that. Go back and look at the game. For me, this game has now set the standard for board games on the Switch. I love the idea of playing a board game on a video game console that does not look and play like a board game. I get all the same satisfaction in playing and the same strategy and everything, but the user interface and the way I play the game is totally different than the analog version of the game. Plus, it has all the modes I'm looking for. It has a good solo mode. It has a campaign. It has 3 ways to play multiplayer: pass and play, live online, or asynchronously online. So thank you, Dire Wolf Digital, for an amazing board game experience on this handheld console. It is so good, and it's one of these games that I will just pick up and play every so often. Just like a Zelda game or anything else, I'll pick up and crank up Raiders of the North Sea just to get that board game experience, and just the way that you interface and interact with it is just amazing. So aside from the issues I have with the tutorial not being in depth enough, this gets high praise and high marks from me. Raiders of the North Sea from Dire Wolf Digital. It's available on the eShop right now for $19.99 and worth every penny of it. But now let me hear from you. Have you tried out Raiders of the North Sea on the Switch or any other device? What do you think about the game? And if you never have, go try it. If you enjoyed this video, please give a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And as always, creative closing catchphrase.